Pointing at the large pile of dead flowers in front of me, I turned to my smirking mother-in-law and asked, "What's the meaning of this?"
What's the meaning of this? It's simple. High school grad like you should just leave.
She said with a loud laugh. Before I could respond, someone else spoke up first.
Driving her away? No way. Don't you know who my sister is?
The one who said that, face red with anger, was Julie. If it's just a matter of her nagging me or pulling some petty pranks, I can tolerate it. But using Julie's important wedding as an excuse to harass me? That's absolutely unforgivable. My mother-in-law needs to understand how foolish her actions have been. She's insulted me over and over, but that all ends today. Here and now, I'll bring this to a close. And she'll face the consequences for her actions. As she tumbles down, regretting every bit of it, I'll make sure she realizes what she's done. I watched my mother-in-law trembling for some reason, as if she were terrified. My name is Katherine Taylor. I'm 35 years old and work as a photographer. I married my husband, Alex, 10 years ago, and even now, we're as close as newlyweds. Aside from not having kids, I'd say my life has been smooth sailing. But there's one problem. It was my strict mother-in-law, Susan. She looks down on me for being a high school graduate and doesn't understand my work at all. On top of that, she barges into my home just to nag. It's truly exhausting and makes me hate dealing with her. But because she's the mother of someone dear to me, I've been putting up with it. When I talk about this, some might say, "You don't need to tolerate that, even if she's your mother-in-law." It's true that mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law issues are a common topic. There are even people who choose to distance themselves from their in-laws. But I don't want to do that, because I have an idea why my mother-in-law is so angry. It's because of what I did back then. I think Susan hates me because of something that happened before I married Alex. Back when I had just started working as an independent photographer, I frequently visited a diner in my neighborhood. The main reason was that it was relatively cheap, which was perfect for me at the time. With little money and not many clients, I would always order the cheapest set meal on the menu.
Welcome, Katherine. The set meal again today?
Hi, yeah. Sorry for always ordering the cheapest thing.
Don't be. I'm just happy you're here.
Said Alex, who worked part-time at the diner. Honestly, he was another reason I kept coming back. At the time, Alex was a college student, the same age as me. He seemed to know so many things I didn't, and that fascinated me. Initially, I was just curious about him. But the more we talked, the more I found myself drawn to Alex. It seemed Alex felt the same way about me. Eventually, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. What I hadn't anticipated, though, was how over the moon I'd feel about being in a relationship with Alex. I started studying as a photographer after graduating from high school and spent my late teens working. I didn't regret it, but it's true that I hadn't had much experience with relationships. So, having Alex as my first boyfriend was something I was ridiculously excited about. And that's when I made a big mistake. One day, Alex came to me for advice.
I actually want to be a chef.
A chef? Do you like cooking?
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking about getting a chef's license, but
Alex looked troubled, and when I later heard why, I understood. Alex's family ran a jewelry business, with his father as the president. As their only son, Alex was expected to take over. At the time, he was about to graduate college and was struggling to decide on his future. In other words, Alex wanted to be a chef, but he was also obligated to take over the family business. He was stuck between his dreams and his responsibilities. Hearing his dilemma, I impulsively said, "Why not just do what you want, Alex?"
But
"I get what you're saying, but it's your life. You should do what makes you happy." In my mind, there was no problem with following your heart. After all, I had been living my life on my own terms. I decided to become a photographer after graduating from high school and did not take over my dad's company. My dad passed away when I was 20, but he never opposed my dream of becoming a photographer. In fact, he supported me wholeheartedly, even finding a mentor for me through his connections. I also have a younger sister, Julie, who is 4 years younger than me. She has also no plans to take over our dad's business.
I'm going to be a doctor.
She's always said, and our dad supported her decision as well. Having grown up with a father like that, I believed it was okay to live freely. That's why, Alex, you should feel free to follow your dreams too.
then, Katherine, what happened to your dad's company?
My uncle took it over. He had already been working with my dad for years. It was undoubtedly better for someone experienced to take over rather than someone like me who knew nothing about the business. That's what I genuinely believe. Either way, a company can continue even if the children don't inherit it. I wanted Alex to understand that. And as Alex listened to my story, he seemed to agree.
You're right. It doesn't have to be me.
Just as Alex was about to finish his sentence, the door to his apartment swung open with a loud bang.
You! How dare you say something like that?
What? Who is that? We were in Alex's apartment, where he lived alone while attending his college. There was no reason for a stranger to just barge in. As I stood there, bewildered, Alex spoke up.
Mom, what's going on?
What? Alex's mom. The woman, who Alex introduced as his mother, glanced at me briefly before letting out a deep sigh.
Alex, who is this woman?
She's my girlfriend. It's none of your business, Mom.
It is my business. A woman with no class like her, she's not fit to be a part of our family.
At that time, I did want to marry Alex. But he was still in college, and we weren't even talking about marriage yet. Even so, his mother immediately rejected me without hearing anything more.
So, are you a student at Alex's college?
Well, no. I'm a high school graduate and have been working. I was about to explain that I was an independent photographer. But the moment she heard high school grad, her expression changed dramatically.
A high school grad? No way. Someone like you can't marry Alex. You're not fit to be the wife of a CEO.
From there, it was her stage. She insulted me endlessly and even started arguing with Alex.
That's enough. If my stubborn mom keeps acting this way, I'm absolutely not taking over the family business.
Furious, Alex chose not to return home after graduating college and instead pursued his dream of becoming a chef. That's the backstory, and I think it's why Alex's mother, Susan, dislikes me. Not only was she against my marrying Alex, but Alex ignored her wishes and married me anyway. That's probably another reason she hates me. In any case, she dislikes everything about me. It's clear that I was the catalyst for this entire situation. Of course, I didn't say anything wrong. Alex ultimately decided his own path, so I don't need to feel guilty. And yet, I can't help but think it's partly my fault. So should I keep trying to tolerate Susan, even if it means putting up with this? Or should I just give up? Lately, I've been feeling conflicted about it. It's partly because her awful personality makes it even harder. But honestly, I didn't think she had a bad personality only after I married Alex. In fact, I'd thought she was difficult long before then. Let's go back to the story I mentioned earlier. When Alex was confiding in me about his dreams, Susan barged into his apartment. That's a fact. But the first time I met her was even earlier than that. Perhaps she doesn't remember, but I remember it vividly. It was when I had just begun my apprenticeship under Emily, my mentor in photography. Emily ran her own small photo studio in a town on the East Coast. It was the kind of studio where local families came to take pictures for school admissions or graduations. She also took photos for advertisements, was invited to weddings for commemorative shots, and even captured landscapes around the town in her spare time. In the midst of all this, she found time to mentor me. I was both her assistant and her apprentice, juggling large bags of equipment and helping out at various job sites. And on the day everything went wrong, I had accompanied her to a wedding venue.
Tomorrow's the wedding shoot. Be extra careful because it's a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Got it. I remember that conversation from the day before clearly. So I was very cautious at the venue, ensuring everything went smoothly. Emily focused on capturing the bride and groom, as well as their guests, with great attention to detail. When the wedding and reception were over, it was time for the commemorative photos in the garden as planned. I began the preparations as scheduled, but next to me, some children brought by the guests were shouting excitedly. I found their liveliness charming and couldn't help but smile at them. Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the cheerful noise.
Be quiet. Stop shouting like that.
I turned quickly to see a woman scolding the children harshly. At first, I thought it was just a parent reprimanding her kids. But something fell off.
Poor kids making such a fuss. How annoying. Go play somewhere else.
There was no need to speak like that. I found myself staring at the woman, unable to look away. Then she noticed me and approached, her condescending attitude evident.
You there? You're the photographer today, right?
Well, yes. I'm just the assistant, though.
Assistant? Whatever, as long as you can take pictures.
She handed me a camera, and I tilted my head in confusion. What's this for?
Take pictures of us with this.
I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of work. I couldn't neglect the job I was assigned to do. When I tried to explain this, the woman became furious.
Aren't you hired for the photography? Then this is part of your job too.
But I am.
Don't talk back. You're just a broke, bottom-tier photographer anyway.
That was the final straw. But given my position, I couldn't openly complain. While I remained silent, the woman let out a dramatic sigh and said,
What a foolish girl. Don't you understand it's pointless to resist?
Poor people should obey the rich. Those at the bottom should do as the customer says. That's what she told me, and it was infuriating. I was at my limit.
Katherine, is something wrong?
Thankfully, Emily arrived just in time. I explained the situation to her. Well, Emily, upon hearing the situation, took the photo for the woman, and things settled down for the time being. However, the woman's face remained sour, and she kept muttering, "Poor people," under her breath. That woman was none other than my mother-in-law. This story alone should give you an idea of her unpleasant personality. I realized who she was later when Alex and I visited his family to announce our marriage. Alex hadn't planned to formally report our marriage to his parents, but I convinced him that it was only proper. So we went to his parents' house for the visit. But even there, I experienced the same treatment. Right after greeting Alex's parents, Susan said,
Oh, it's that high school Grad. I told you I don't approve of her.
Enough already. We're only here to announce our marriage, not to ask for your permission.
Both Alex and I were adults at the time. We didn't need parental approval to get married. After enduring her complaints, Alex and I decided to simply register our marriage without a ceremony. As such, we never had a wedding ceremony. Even so, our relationship as husband and wife has always been strong, so I didn't mind. Then, one day, I received a call from my younger sister, Julie.
Guess what? I'm getting married.
What? Married? Shortly after I became independent, Julie had been accepted straight into medical school. At that time, our dad had already passed away, so I struggled to figure out how to cover her tuition. Here's the situation, Uncle Tom. Could you lend us some money? I turned to my dad's younger brother, Tom, for help. With a smile, he said,
Well, since I inherited the business that was supposed to go to you too.
In return, my uncle offered to pay for Julie's tuition. When I expressed my concern about accepting his generosity, he suggested,
Well then, how about Julie repays me once she becomes a doctor?
True to his word, Julie began repaying her tuition little by little from her salary once she became a doctor. By the time she turned 30 and nearly finished repaying the debt, she decided to marry her fiancé. Congratulations, Julie. I'll take the best wedding photos for you on your big day.
Thanks, Katherine. I'm counting on you.
After that conversation, I hung up the phone. Then, something unexpected happened.
I heard everything. Your sister's getting married, huh? Who's the groom?
Susan, why are you in our house? Alex and I live together, just the two of us. Yet, out of nowhere, Susan barged into our living room.
I had a spare key made.
She said, dangling the key in front of me. I was utterly furious. Making a duplicate key to someone else's house without permission, that's practically a crime. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her strongly. All I could do was muster the courage to ask her to return the key. After that incident, however, her attitude suddenly changed. She began claiming that, since my parents were no longer alive, she would take their place. What do you mean by that?
What else could it mean? For Julie's wedding, it's better to have someone stand in as her parents, right?
Though I found it strange, Susan surprisingly treated us well. She offered some of the precious metals from her business to Julie, my sister, and even introduced us to a wedding venue through her company's contacts. Julie's fiancé was the heir to a hospital, and Julie herself worked there as well. However, since they were both young, they didn't have much in savings. For Julie, having a luxurious wedding at a low cost was a great help. Since Julie was happy with the arrangements, I decided to accept Susan's goodwill despite my reservations. Still, I couldn't shake a sense of unease.
Thanks to Susan, tomorrow's wedding will be perfect.
I'm glad to hear that, Julie.
Make sure to thank her for me, okay?
Since Julie was so pleased, I resolved to express my gratitude to Susan at the wedding venue. But as soon as I stepped into the venue, I was left speechless. In front of my assigned seat was an enormous display of dead flowers. Pointing at the overwhelming sight, I turned to my smirking mother-in-law and asked, "What's the meaning of this?"
What's the meaning? It's simple. A high school grad like you should just leave.
She said loudly with a grin. Before I could respond, someone else spoke up first.
Driving her away? No way. Don't you know who my sister is?
The one who shouted, her face red with anger, was Julie. I could tolerate her nagging or minor pranks, but using Julie's special day to humiliate me was crossing the line. Susan needed to understand how foolish she had been. She had insulted me countless times, but this would be the last. I would resolve everything here and now, and she would face the consequences. She would regret what she had done as she tumbled into disgrace. I turned my gaze to my trembling mother-in-law, who was now visibly shaking. Calmly, I asked, "Was this harassment, Susan?"
What? This,
Her response was hesitant and unconvincing. Sensing something off, I turned to Julie. Behind me stood Julie, looking furious. Beside her was my Uncle Tom. "Tom, you're already here?"
Yes, Catherine. Is this how you're usually treated?
My uncle frowned as he asked the question. I nodded slightly. "Well, yes, pretty much."
I see. In that case, I may need to reconsider some things.
It was then that I realized why Susan had been trembling. Her company had business dealings with my uncle's firm. Just being caught mistreating me would be a major blow to her reputation. But the situation was even worse. The person she had mistreated was me, her daughter-in-law, and my uncle's cherished niece. For Tom, business losses wouldn't matter if it meant cutting ties with her entirely. The realization must have dawned on her the moment she saw my uncle. The smug, grinning woman from earlier was now pale and shaking uncontrollably. When I turned my gaze back to Susan, she flinched and quickly started making excuses to my uncle.
this isn't what it looks like. It was just a joke or something like that.
A joke? Even as a joke, it's in terribly poor taste.
Tom was clearly furious, his expression dark as he stared at her.
I was only trying to liven up the wedding.
I fail to see how this could liven up anything.
His tone was firm, and she wilted under his words. Sensing this was my chance, I decided to confront her. "I don't know what you were thinking, Susan, but this isn't something you do at Julie's wedding, is it?"
I told you, it was just a joke.
"You've gone too far. Time and time again. Enough is enough." For the first time, I spoke back to her in a strong tone. Susan looked completely taken aback, likely because I'd never stood up to her so firmly before. She stayed silent as I let out all the frustrations I had kept bottled up. I expressed how furious I was about being looked down on for my education. I told her how disrespected I felt when she insulted my career. I laid everything bare. Naturally, she was stunned into silence, though I imagine the presence of my uncle made her situation all the more awkward. Still, her expression began to shift. Before I knew it, she pursed her lips and looked away.
Who do you think you are, acting like everything is my fault?
"Well, isn't it your fault, Susan?"
My fault? How is this my fault? If anything, it's your fault.
She snapped. Her argument was as follows. I had supposedly brainwashed Alex into not taking over the family business. On top of that, even after 10 years of marriage, I had yet to bear children. Not having children, in her view, was a deliberate choice to avoid providing an heir for the family. Moreover, she claimed that my insistence on being a photographer meant I neglected household chores in Alex's care. According to her, my house was always in disarray, which was proof of my failures as a wife. Finally, she concluded with this.
In short, you're just a high school grad with no education who doesn't understand the importance of an heir.
I was left speechless. Of course, I understood the importance of having an heir. When my dad passed away, I too struggled with what to do about his company. In my case, my uncle was there to take over, so the situation didn't escalate into a major issue. But in Alex's family's case, there were no other relatives to take over the business. Well then, why not have one of the employees take over?
What? No, that would never work. What about our retirement?
Well, so that's the real issue. The truth was, she didn't want the company to pass into the hands of an outsider. What she wanted was for her child to inherit the business and funnel the profits to her.
In other words, you're not just worthless, you're a hindrance to me, the absolute worst trash of a daughter-in-law.
She threw her head back and laughed loudly, declaring her disdain in no uncertain terms. This time, I couldn't hold back my anger. However, before I could respond, Julie shot back at Susan.
As I said earlier, don't you know what my sister does?
Huh? What use could that woman possibly be?
She is a useless wife with no education. Susan scoffed, laughing as she criticized me. Julie, on the other hand, continued with a tone of exasperation.
My sister creates advertisements for your husband's company.
What?
Susan blinked in confusion. I simply nodded quietly. The story goes back to just before Alex and I got married. When my father-in-law learned about my work, he approached me with a request.
I hate to ask, but could you handle the advertising photography for our company?
I don't mind, but
Of course, I'll pay you for it.
the dynamic in Alex's family was such that my mother-in-law held more power, and my father-in-law, Robert, couldn't openly oppose her. Since she was against my marriage to Alex, he couldn't voice his support. So Robert devised a strategy. He had me, as a professional photographer, work on the advertisements and posters for his company. By hiring me at a discounted rate, he could prove my worth to Susan. It worked like a charm. At the time, Susan begrudgingly said,
Well, if it lowers the advertising costs, I suppose there's no choice.
so she must have known I was handling the company's work. Did you forget about that?
What? Wasn't that just a one-time thing?
It seemed she had misunderstood. She thought I had only provided financial help back then. I've been working with the company ever since.
What? Well,
Seeing her falter, I seized the opportunity. In that case, I suppose you don't need the help of someone you consider useless. From now on, I'll no longer accept any work from the company. Just so you know. Bang! I slammed the table firmly. Susan flinched.
What a shame. Without Catherine's help, the advertising costs will skyrocket.
what?
Susan began to panic, her composure unraveling. After a moment's thought, she clung to me in desperation.
You're joking, right? About the cost skyrocketing?
Well, since it's the family business, I've been charging next to nothing. That much was true. Robert had insisted on paying me the standard rate, but I had declined. Sure, part of the reason was that he was Alex's father. But more importantly, I was genuinely touched by how much effort he put into supporting our marriage. Thanks to my mother-in-law, however, all of that goodwill was now ruined. Knowing this, even my father-in-law would surely be furious. As I looked at Susan, she crumbled to the floor, utterly defeated. To add insult to injury, my Uncle Tom delivered a final blow.
By the way, I'll be reevaluating our business partnership.
What?
Of course. My beloved niece has been treated this way. It's only natural.
My uncle shot a piercing glare at my mother-in-law, who panicked and clung to him.
Wait, if you do that, our company will suffer a massive blow.
The impact would indeed be significant, but this was entirely Susan's fault. She turned pleading eyes toward me, but there was nothing I could do for her. I had already retaliated by refusing any further work for their company. The loss from my withdrawal alone would heavily affect their finances. Now, it was up to those connected to me to decide what consequences Susan would face. Whatever happened next, she had brought it on herself. As I was thinking this, Robert appeared.
Well, always a pleasure to see you. I heard it's your niece's wedding today.
He began speaking to my uncle without noticing his wife. Calmly, my uncle interrupted.
Before we proceed, may I have a word with you?
Of course. What's the matter?
It's about your wife.
Tom recounted the earlier events to Robert. As he listened, Robert's face grew progressively paler. By the time the story ended, he was completely ashen.
I deeply apologize. My wife has.
No need. Until today, I hadn't realized her true nature either.
It's my fault for letting her act unchecked. But this is too much.
It's not what you think. It was just a joke.
Enough. You probably looked down on me too, because you thought I wouldn't turn against you.
For the first time, my father-in-law raised his voice, startling everyone present, myself included. Susan, equally stunned, stood frozen with her mouth slightly agape.
I've held back long enough.
What?
Don't think for a second that I'll keep tolerating this. I'm divorcing you. That's final.
His words were icy. Susan, now desperate, began crying and clinging to him.
Wait, please don't do this. I didn't mean any harm. You said yourself that we needed an heir.
I did say that. But I never said the heir had to be Alex or a grandchild.
Robert explained that he believed in nurturing talented employees who could lead the company. It didn't have to be family as long as the person could safeguard the company and its employees.
I've had enough of you.
No, this can't be.
Alex feels the same way.
Robert added, glancing toward the entrance. There stood Alex, quietly watching everything unfold.
Katherine, sorry I'm late.
Alex, is the food preparation done?
Yeah, just finished.
Today, Alex's cooking was to be served at Julie's wedding. But with the tense atmosphere in the room, the wedding seemed like it might be impossible to continue. Alex seemed to sense this as well.
So, what happened?
Oh, well. I pointed at the table covered in dead flowers and explained everything to him. Meanwhile, Susan remained collapsed in tears. She wasn't apologizing or begging for forgiveness, just crying like a child.
I see. If that's the case, it's clear Mom is in the wrong.
Alex said, turning toward her. At that moment, she raised her head.
It's a misunderstanding. Alex, you'll understand, right?
No, I don't. Sorry, but I don't.
Listen,
That's enough. I don't want to hear any more excuses. I've made up my mind. I'm cutting ties with you, Mom.
Alex's sharp words left her speechless.
I should have done this sooner. I'm sorry, Katherine.
No, it's okay. I've already gotten back at her in my own way. I felt a sense of closure now. Susan had lost the trust of both Robert and Alex. She might even face consequences from Robert's company for jeopardizing their contracts and my work. Surely she would learn her lesson this time. If I had one lingering regret, though, it was about Julie. Her once-in-a-lifetime wedding had been marred by this incident because of me. I approached Julie feeling guilty. Julie, I'm so sorry for causing trouble today,
It's fine. We can still have the wedding.
she said, glancing at the clock. The ceremony was scheduled to start soon, but we hadn't missed the window yet. But
It's okay. I'll have them remove those flowers. You just take your seat.
all right. Julie called over the venue staff. As I watched her manage the situation, Robert muttered beside me,
I'll take Susan home. She'll only cause more trouble if she stays.
but
No, this is necessary. After what she's done, there's no way I can let her stay at this wedding.
with that, he stood Susan up, gave a polite bow to the rest of us, and left the venue with her. Thanks to the cooperation of the wedding staff, Julie's wedding went ahead without any further issues. The guests, who had been unsettled earlier, seemed to make an effort to enjoy the event as though nothing had happened. Naturally, I didn't need to mention that I enthusiastically captured countless photos of Julie throughout the ceremony. Of course, I made sure to take plenty of beautiful shots of her with her new husband, Ken. Despite the earlier turmoil, Julie's wedding concluded successfully. However, shortly afterward, I fell ill. Perhaps the resolution of the issues with Susan made me relax too much. I ended up being unable to return to work until a week after Julie's wedding. All right, first task back, a meeting with the advertising agency. I thought jumping straight into a photo shoot might be too physically demanding, so I chose a meeting as my first task. Talking doesn't require much stamina, and easing back into work seemed like the best approach. Visiting a familiar advertising agency, I worked on planning for the next photo shoot. Since I wasn't ready to start shooting right away, I requested a schedule with plenty of flexibility. After wrapping up the meeting, as I stepped out of the conference room, I unexpectedly ran into Susan.
Oh, what are you doing here?
Oh, hello, Susan. About the other day.
Don't tell me you're here to interfere with me again.
She glared at me and raised her voice, her tone sharp. I had no idea what she was talking about, and her hostility left me confused. While this exchange was happening, the agency's director came out of the conference room.
Is everything all right?
Oh, well, it's nothing, I replied with a strained smile. But Susan suddenly pushed me aside.
Thank you for your time. I'm from the jewelry company.
Oh, from the Taylor Group.
Yes, that's right. I'm Robert's wife. I came here today regarding our advertisements.
She rattled on at a rapid pace. It became clear that she was trying to find a replacement for me. From the way she spoke, it didn't seem like she had finalized her divorce from my father-in-law yet.
I see. But as far as I know, your advertisements are handled by your daughter-in-law.
The director said, gesturing toward me. I gave a small shake of my head.
Is there a problem?
Well, yes, sort of, I said vaguely. It wasn't exactly easy to admit that the issue stemmed from harassment by Susan. But before I could say more, Susan jumped in. She presented some documents she had brought to the director and said smugly,
We fired her. She's useless and dared to defy me.
She grinned as she spoke, completely unrepentant despite her recent tearful display. I was utterly exasperated. At that moment, a woman appeared behind Susan. She snatched the documents from her hands and, without hesitation, tore them to pieces.
What do you think you're doing?
That's my line.
Huh?
I heard what you just said. So you're the awful mother-in-law who mistreated my beloved apprentice.
The woman standing there was none other than Emily. Her piercing gaze was fixed on my mother-in-law.
Apprentice? What? No way.
It's true, Katherine is my beloved apprentice, and from what I've heard, you've treated her horribly.
Emily's sharp tone left Susan sweating profusely. Later, I learned that Susan had been planning to hire Emily as my replacement. She had even told Emily that I had abandoned my work and run away, spinning a tale to win her over. Though Emily had been skeptical, she chose not to pry, considering it unprofessional. As a result, she had almost agreed to take on the job.
Well, we were supposed to discuss the details today, but it seems there's no need anymore.
What do you mean?
I've learned plenty from Katherine. I never expected you to be her mother-in-law.
Emily declared, her voice firm. At that moment, Susan flinched visibly.
Let's have our boss hear this as well, shall we? About what you've done to Katherine.
Without waiting for a reply, Emily began recounting everything I had told her right then and there. As the story unfolded, Susan's face grew pale, while the director's turned an angry shade of red. By the time Emily finished, the director glared at Susan and practically shouted,
Clients are important, but I believe in valuing our professionals just as much.
Yes.
Regrettably, I don't think we can work with you anymore. We'll have to decline any further business with your company.
With that, the director brushed past Susan and left.
Wait, this is a misunderstanding.
She cried, chasing after him. But our director didn't even glance back. Watching this unfold, Emily suddenly murmured as if recalling something.
Oh, it's her. That woman from back then.
It seemed Emily had remembered her previous encounter with Susan. But by that point, her words never reached her. As it turned out, Susan's actions at the advertising agency were entirely her own doing. After being served divorce papers by Robert, she had tried to salvage her situation but failed miserably, losing even the agency's business. There was no way Robert wouldn't be angry. Later, he confided to me,
I made a mistake by giving her a grace period to find a new place. I should have acted sooner.
He had completely severed ties with her after this incident. Under pressure from Robert, she reluctantly signed the divorce papers. As for what happened to her after that, I only know bits and pieces from what I've heard. What is clear is that she started working part-time at a grocery store. However, her bad attitude got her into trouble, and the job didn't last. After being fired, she switched to cleaning jobs, likely because they involved minimal interaction with others. She now works as a cleaner for various companies. Ironically, I've heard that some employees occasionally make remarks about her, such as, cleaning staff. That's rock bottom. She must be some poor, uneducated loser. While judging people by their job is wrong, it's hard to ignore the fact that she used to do the same thing. Even if she were to hear those words, I doubt she'd have a comeback. Regardless, I hope she manages to carry on with her life. As for me, my life has changed drastically since all this unfolded, particularly my personal life. The truth is, I recently discovered that I'm pregnant. At first, I thought my health issues were due to the stress from my mother-in-law's drama, but it turns out it was because of my pregnancy. Thanks to you, Julie, I realized I was pregnant. I said to her as we wrapped up my checkup at the hospital where she works.
Most people would have figured it out sooner, you know?
Julie laughed. Her laughter was contagious, and I found myself smiling along with her.
By the way, where's Alex?
He's the same as ever. He's at the hotel restaurant today, showing off his skills in the kitchen.
In that case, could you let him know that Ken and I want to visit next time?
I tilted my head curiously. What's gotten into you all of a sudden?
Well, I didn't get to really savor his cooking at my wedding. I'd like to enjoy it properly at least once.
Come to think of it, my Uncle Tom had mentioned something similar a few days ago. Oh, now I'm craving Alex's cooking too. That's it. Tonight, I'll have him make something special at home. Don't you think? I murmured softly, rubbing my stomach. As I imagined the face of my beloved Alex and our baby we were eagerly awaiting, a gentle warmth filled my heart.